Welcome everybody to the Right Conversation, the virtual edition. We're really excited to have you all a part of it and everyone tuning in. We thank you for really taking time out of your day to be here. The ultimate goal of this conversation is to continue to normalize the conversation around mental health. A lot of times where individuals may be struggling with issues and may not understand how to seek help or how to really either be supportive of someone that's struggling or voice that you're struggling. And we want to do our best to normalize that. I'm JD Dubois. I'm the founder of Everyone Has a Story, the nonprofit organization that puts on the right conversation. One of the main reasons that I thought that this was important was because it was something that I felt that I could have utilized as a youth. So when I was struggling at 13, 14, 15, it would have been really helpful if I had a space to discuss, hey, I'm struggling with the death of one of my best friends. Hey, I'm struggling with knowing that there's a financial burden on my family and I have to figure out a way to put us in a better position to be able to bounce those ideas and to be able to have a space where my friends were comfortable having that discussion. I thought could have helped me. And so I want to provide that with that next generation. With no further ado, I'll introduce our panelists and then we'll get started.
I am Dr. Corey Yeager. I am the team psychotherapist with the Detroit Pistons. By craft, by trade, I am a psychotherapist, a systemic, contextual, relational therapist. And the reason that I'm interested in this conversation continuously is that, especially in the Black and Brown community, the stigma around engaging therapy or psychological support is extremely strong. So having conversations like this continuously, one way in which we can start to chip away at that stigma, really one conversation at a time. So I'm always excited anytime that we can join these types of conversations and work to kind of bust and break that stigma. So that's the reason that I'm excited about today.
Hi, I'm Imani Stafford. I am a WNBA player for the Dallas Wings. I'm currently a first-year law student at Southwestern Law, taking a hiatus from basketball to pursue that. I'm a mental health advocate and a poet. I pretty much believe that my platform was given to me to speak about sexual violence as I'm a sexual abuse survivor, mental health, I'm bipolar, and just kind of give people a realistic depiction of what this looks like and how you can live a successful life, even though you have these kind of things you have to deal with.
All right, so I'm Christina E. Rogers. I'm an author, an entrepreneur. I make my life seem like it's perfect, but a lot of times when people view that, they don't know my backstory. I think it's really important to highlight a lot of things that I've been through so that people understand that we are all pretty much the same. We all go through things and it's possible to overcome things over and over and over again. So I'm very happy to be in this space with these wonderful people. And I look forward to you guys learning something from today.
What's going on? I'm CJ Miles. I am a 15-year NBA vet, most recently with the Washington Wizards. My bio isn't as lengthy as everybody else's. I'm still in the middle of that. But I am a guy who dealt with a lot of the issues going along through my career coming in at a young age and didn't know I was dealing with them. So I think learning those things from certain people as I went on and then realizing that's what it was, it helped me to be a helping hand to a bunch of guys that I've dealt with younger than me coming up through the league and kind of showcase that. So I'm excited to continue to expand on that.
And to that point, CJ, Doc, I'd love to hear your thoughts and then everyone else. The awareness. What are some ways that you can be more aware that you're struggling? For me, something that allows me to be more aware is yoga, mindfulness, meditation, trying to focus on my breathing and trying to self-reflect. So reflect on past decisions or reflect on certain reactions that I don't think needed to happen based off of the situation. So if a situation occurs and my reaction is knee-jerk, kind of unpeeling that and figuring out, okay, why did I react that way? Or why did I feel triggered in that way? Has been something that has helped me kind of grow from a wellness perspective. But Doc, I'd love to get your thoughts on how we as a society can be more aware that we're struggling. Because a lot of times I feel like we're going through experiences, and because it may be normalized in our communities, we're not aware that it's traumatic or that it's something that we're struggling with.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we must do is when we're searching for awareness, because one of the things about awareness is you don't know until you find it. And so we should be digging around in our lives and reflecting, similar to what JD said, CJ touched on it a bit, is that we must dig around in our lives to seek that awareness. One thing that we know is that once you start to find that awareness, now you have to figure out what to do with it. It's one thing to be aware. It's another thing to move with that awareness, and try to move in your life in such a way that you can expand upon that awareness. And I think that one of the struggles that we have with that is once we find awareness, almost like finding a weed in your yard. Like, oh, I see the weed in my yard. But it's one, you now know that, but if you don't want that weed in your yard, it doesn't do you any good just to go out in your yard and pull the top of the weed off. Well, it looks like it's gone, but it's not gone. The root system is still there. And what will happen in a few days if you didn't dig the root out? It'll be right back. So if we can do the work of digging down to the roots of our issues, becoming more aware of that root system, we can start to unpack some of those negativities, some of those stigmas that we carry with us every single day. So I think that is a piece, recognizing that we have some of those issues, that's that awareness, but then what to do with it and how to dig deep into understanding those issues for ourselves. Because one of the things that we say all the time, JD, is it doesn't matter how JD sees my issues. It doesn't matter how Chris or CJ or Imani see my issues. It really, truly only matters how I see them and how I work through them, how my healing is mine. It's not anyone else's. So doing that work consistently, I think, is critical.
And as you guys answer, just for the attendees who just joined, we're just discussing how to be more aware that you may be struggling.
I think also when you grow up in systems of chaos and trauma, which most of us do coming from the inner city and being a Black person, and even me and JD were talking about this the other day, just how much we are constantly seeing the barrage of Black lives being taken, where that's a trauma that we're constantly being kind of just desensitized to. And so a lot of times you don't understand that you're going through these things because that's normal to you. Like, I know for me, just growing up in an abusive situation, I didn't know these things weren't normal until I experienced the other side, you know? So once you kind of get out of these systems that are oppressing you or putting you in danger, you're like, wow, I didn't have to live this way. And you kind of can recognize those things. Similar to what you're saying about awareness, it's hard to have it until you get to the other side.
Go ahead. Oh, you want to go? To touch on what Imani said, like, it's great to think about it, like where we grew up. We talk about this sometimes with our friends, like even before we had social media and that platform, like the stuff that we seeing that we're able to have that place to magnify it, it was like that already. And I think some people think that it's getting worse and that now these people have it worse than these people and you don't know what we're going through and now people are hard to talk to each other. When, like she said, it became normal because it was like, where we going to talk about it at? Where we going to fight at? Where we going? It was like, it was the t-shirt made and we kept moving. Like, that's what it was. Like, and that's wild. And then as far as like knowing that as you get older, that these mental aspects of things are the problem, you have to like searching yourself because your whole life you've been told it's not that. That's the one thing it's not. So you never look for that. I've exhausted myself mentally, physically, spiritually, every other way instead of looking for that because I was told from the very beginning that I was crazy if it was that. And I wasn't going to be crazy.
Okay, so I think a lot of times you have to continue to, even however many times it takes. I do it daily where I sit down and I like really comb through my brain and like how I'm feeling and I ask myself honest questions and I'm constantly trying to grow and I'm constantly trying not to be affected from the things that are going on around me because most of the time it's just like a lot of chaos around me. So I have to really put myself in a place where I have a peaceful surrounding. I have people around me that understand me, who are willing to listen to me if I have an issue. And I have to be completely honest with myself over and over and over again so that I can deal with issues that I might not know that are there. If I like for example, if I yell at my sister and she's like, why are you yelling at me? I don't understand. I'm like, why am I yelling at her? I have to like go deep within me and continue to figure out what's going on inside of me so that I can heal myself.
That's that root system, though, Chris, that you just described. That you asking the reflective question of why am I screaming at you? Why am I mad? And it reminds me, Chris, that we can talk about anger or being mad as a secondary emotion. It's not a primary emotion. It's coming from another emotion, sadness, disappointment, all of those things that many times we don't discuss, especially in our community. We don't discuss sadness or disappointment. We can show you anger very well, though. We are well equipped to show you anger very quickly. But if we can do the work, the reflective work of saying, all right, hold on. Why am I mad? They didn't really do nothing. It was small what they did. That's that process of digging down into that root system to better understand ourselves. And if we can better understand ourselves, we'll better be able to engage those people around us. I think that's an important point.
I'd love to hear the group's thoughts on what CJ kind of mentioned earlier about when we're struggling through things in our communities, the one place that we're not allowed to say is a problem is mentally. Like, regardless of what's going on, for me, it was probably from 6th grade till borderline till now, every year I've lost someone I grew up around. Gun violence, drunk driving, some type of incident where I lost somebody that was very close to me. And kind of what CJ mentioned, it was normal. We're going to make a t-shirt, we're going to wear it to school up until really the next time someone passes. And in between that space, when we're struggling and providing those secondary emotions of anger, or in sports, a lot of times you'd see players that are exuding more emotion in their play, and they're looked at as like, he's a bad guy, he's a bad teammate. Well, really, he's just trying to let out the things that you never give him a space to speak on. Man, in 3 years, I've lost 2 of the closest people to me, and nobody has sat me down and said, hey, it's going to be all right. There's nothing wrong with feeling how you're feeling. If you need to take a week away, kind of speak to the experiences of knowing that you're struggling, but also knowing that if you say, man, I don't feel well mentally, people are like, oh yeah, my man's crazy.
I think a great example of that, I don't know if you guys read it, but Ben Gordon had a Players Tribune interview recently, and he was just so raw, and he said it in such a way that we can understand it, right? Because his biggest thing was like, I didn't know this was not normal. Like, I've been playing sports my whole life. I tug it up, I go play, I let it out on the court. That's what I was used to doing. So when I lost basketball, I didn't know where to put all these emotions. And I think, like, especially for me, like, I'm bipolar, and my entire life, I figured this out a couple years ago. In my entire life, I thought I was depressed, I thought I was whatever, and I kind of ran from a diagnosis. It was scary to me. And first word you hear somebody say is, man, the weather acted bipolar. Oh, she bipolar, I don't mess with her, you know? And so this is really what I am. And so I see the depictions on TV, and I'm like, man, I'm not that bad. I ain't crazy. You know what I mean? And you kind of automatically have this kind of like, let me distance myself from what people believe this to be, as opposed to let me be authentic in what my journey is and figure out how I kind of fit in the spectrum. And like, even now, like, I'm a very big mental health advocate. Everybody knows, and I talk about it as much as I can, but I still have to fight with myself to be honest about it. Because I'm like, oh, you know, you got to only tell people the good parts, or like, you're doing great now, you got to be this beacon of hope. But I crash too. There's moments where I have to go, I'll be back to square one with this, and I'm dealing with it again. I'm upset with myself because I'm like, yeah, we've been through this, we over it. You know, like, we don't got time to keep. But for me, my mental health journey, it is going to be a lifelong thing, because I have a mental illness, and kind of wrapping my head around that and being comfortable enough to sit in that and understand that this is just a part of how I take care of myself took a lot of kind of unlearning and destigmatizing within myself.
It's interesting you talk about that article and the fact that when sports was taken away from him, he didn't understand how to cope, because a lot of times we use sports to cope. Right. But society looks at players who struggles post-career as, he just, because he's not famous, he can't handle the real world. And it's like, no, that shit don't got nothing to do with why I'm struggling. I'm struggling because all of the issues that you never knew I dealt with, that I was able to hide because I had an outlet, because I'm going to wake up early and be in the gym. I'm going to go back later at night. I'm going to exalt so much energy into this sport that all I have to do is go to sleep and wake up the next day and continue to do this. And I'm getting results, and you're giving me attention for hiding what I'm struggling with. So I think the concept or the perception shift of a lot of athletes aren't struggling. Some may, but they're not always just struggling with, oh, I'm not making a lot of money or people aren't paying attention. No, I just don't have another outlet because you never brought one to me because you like that I score 20 a night.
And when I score 20 a night and I'm seen as this major athlete, what it really does oftentimes it insulates even us from having to engage in the core of who we are, engage in the core of our struggle, right? Because I'm insulated. Basketball, any sports has insulated me from really having to dive and show you who I am. So being clear that insulation at some point will be pulled away. The other piece that Imani hit a deep point that I think is really, really important. Oftentimes when folks get a diagnosis, what they do will describe themselves as being that diagnosis. That's not the case. That sometimes what happens is if I have a diagnosis of anxiety or depression, really what it is, the best description that I can have as a therapist is that anxiety may come to visit you, but it is not you. If depression may come to visit you, that is not me. That if we can describe it and engage with it as something that comes to visit us, right? I said it to JD the other day and he laughed. Just because you ring my doorbell, if you ring my front doorbell, you can see me sitting in my chair. But that don't mean I got to answer that door. I may stare at you, and I've done it, and people get very uncomfortable. You ring my doorbell, and I look at you and stare at you, and I don't get up to answer. You like, he heard the doorbell, he's staring at me, but he didn't come answer. Just because you came to visit and ring the bell don't mean I got to answer that. So recognize, go ahead, Imani, go ahead.
Gotta preach, that's some good stuff.
But so recognizing that we can separate that issue that many may describe us as, they'll put that issue on us as, hey, that's who you are. No. That we all have different things. So to some degree, every time I walk up and down a set of steps, I count them. In my own home, I've been up and down the same 8 steps on that first land before the landing and 9 on the second. I count it every time. Well, that could be OCD, but it doesn't get in the way because that's not who I am. It's something I do. It's something that visits me pretty often. But if I don't tell you about it, you don't know it. So if we are clear that description is not all of me, it is not the core of who Corey is, it is part of me. And if I can stay consistent with that engaged core, then I can better understand how that visit may impact me or those around me. So, Imani, I'll let you go ahead from there.
So just like, I think it's very important, even when we think about illnesses that might visit us, I think it's very important to think about the good stuff that might visit us too, because it could leave you. And I think while you have that good opportunity in front of you, that good life or whatever that might be to you, it's still important to keep pouring into yourself, because you might lose it. It might be here today, might be gone tomorrow. And you might try to figure out, you can't grasp onto anything because that's what made you happy. So a lot of times, of course, that starts within yourself, and you have to continue to pour into yourself.
And just to everyone attending, at any moment, if you have any questions, you can just type them and send them in to me. It was a point that everyone has kind of touched on in terms of this trauma and the fact that a lot of times it's not easy to discuss this. What are some ways along our journeys have we found that either a person or a place gave us a space to feel like, okay, I can reach out to this person, or I can go to this place to seek support? Because I think a lot of times everybody is trying to figure out how to seek and get support, but we don't necessarily think about how to provide a space for everyone else to seek and get support. Because if we all thought about it in the terms of, I want to be the person and I want to be a space that you feel comfortable to share, then we all will also have a person and a place to share. So I'd just love to hear each other's thoughts on that.
Well, I'll briefly say that one of the ways that we can provide a space is that we must first be vulnerable. I can't provide you no space to be vulnerable if I ain't gonna be vulnerable with you, because you're not gonna give it back. You're not gonna do it. So being vulnerable with those around us And on top of that vulnerability, being curious. Hey, help me better understand, because I saw you got upset over something that I haven't really seen you get upset over that before. Help me understand what was going on with you, because all of a sudden I've been curious. You may have a better understanding, a better opportunity to share with what was going on with you that produced whatever that was that we're discussing. So being vulnerable with those around us and being curious are ways in which I think we can open the door in those spaces.
That was kind of where I was going with it, Doc. Like when he said about being vulnerable, like a lot of things, like with us as a community, the Black community, we are a very resilient, strong. We've been through a lot of things, so we are very. If I can't see it, then it don't really type of thing. Like if your leg ain't broke, then you can run, like type of thing, you know? So it's hard to really come out and talk about something that they can't see, that they can't understand, because nobody's been in a space with them to understand. And if we're not vulnerable, they have no reason to be curious, because nobody else is giving them a path. And being curious allows a lot of things. I think the biggest thing for me is every time, like maybe something like this, I watch it, and everything we say, nothing might not hit with me today. It might not have nothing to do with me, but it might my wife, but my sister, but my mom, or my daughter as she's growing. Like this is why being curious is just as important as speaking, because information is meant to be passed just as much as it's meant to be taken in. And I really believe that that's why we have to be as vulnerable as possible.
I also think meeting people where they are is very big. I think like I'm very open. My life is like Googleable, and I'm very open. And I always tell people like my goal is to create safe spaces. So if I'm sharing 85% of my existence, right, and I get you to share 2%, that is great. Like that's a success, right? And we always kind of compare ourselves to others and like think that if I can't do what they're doing, then I can't do anything at all. When in reality, like if we all just share 1% more of what we're going through, then we're going to create so much more safe space for people that we're not even aware of.
And I think along those lines is when you're someone who may be at step one, you don't have to look at me or the next person because I can sit for 20, 30 minutes and meditate and go to a yoga class and listen to this. You don't have to compare where we are. It has nothing to do with where you can go, because sometimes, like you're saying, you might just be at the point where you can admit, hey, I'm struggling today. And that's progress. And we got to understand, I think when people are trying to introduce themselves to healing, understanding what's progress, just opening your mouth, or sometimes not even opening your mouth, just thinking and reflecting, dang, why was I so upset earlier? I wonder if that stems from, that's progress. It doesn't have to be, I'm on session 35 with my therapist. I do Zoom calls, I go in. It doesn't have to be that for there to be progress. It can literally be, I'm reflecting on decisions or behavior. And I think that's something to keep in mind along the journey.
To that point, JD, that reflective process, that healing process is about something that I describe therapeutically a lot, is meaning making and meaning taking. So we make meaning of those things around us. We make meanings. All right, what does that mean? We've developed that. But we also, when those folks are around us that reflect to us our community, we take meaning. So from our mom and dad and those people that we love, we are taking their meaning all the time. What does that mean? We take it from them and we ingest it. And then we attempt to make sense of things that may be senseless. For instance, if you've lost a friend or multiple friends by the time you're in 8th grade, you start to make meaning out of that and you normalize it. And you take from others around you, okay, well, I guess we ain't supposed to trip out over that. It's just normal. But Imani said something earlier, that if we've seen that time and time again, that's just what we do. That's how we operate. Until we get the opportunity to compare that relative to others, we may start to say, well, that shit ain't normal. We ain't supposed to do that, are we? Right? So that's that meaning making and meaning taking in the healing process. My healing is mine, though, not yours.
Hey, Doc, you got birds next to you?
What? Why you say that? What you talking about?
Nah, I'm just messing around.
Come on, man. Why you messing with me all the time, JD? I ain't messing with you, dog.
Okay, guys, I got to a point where I don't I don't really care what other people think about what I have to say a lot. I say that, and so people who are closer to me, I care. That's what I'm saying. But it's very helpful, and it gets me to open up more when people aren't judgmental towards me. So if I can say something and then they're like, oh, okay, and they're not looking at me like, you did what? That makes it, easier for me to open up. That's me as a person. So I try, and knowing that about myself, I try to do that for other people. So if they come to me and be like, oh girl, like last night I had a crazy night, and I'm like, oh, that's cool. And I keep it to myself if I feel any type of way, because now she's getting a release, and that might turn into something else. Like, I really feel bad about doing this, and then, it's more open. So for me, it helps when people are not judgmental, but I did get to a point where now I'm just like, I don't care if they are or not, like, whatever.
So Chris, when you say that people are, what we say that we want to do is be non-judgmental, right? Absolutely, it's impossible. Because I'm going to have judgment. Yeah, I'm going to judge your ass. Yeah. Right? But the question is not will I be non-judgmental? The question is, once I hold judgment, what do I do with it? Right? What do I do with the judgment? I'm holding it. Kristen says, I'm like, did she still say that? Why was she tripping? She out of bounds with that? But not that I convey that I then process through that and say, all right, so hold that judgment and be curious with it. It goes back to that position of curiosity.
And I was to that point, in terms of how you're listening, sometimes, Doc, and we talk about this a lot, is getting permission to challenge or asking, what is the role you want me to play? So sometimes somebody's telling me what they're going through. What's my role in this? Do you want me listening, or do you want feedback? Because sometimes we get feedback and a person I'm not asking you your opinion. I'm not asking you your thoughts. I'm not asking you to tell me what I should do. I just want you to shut up and listen. But as a listener, we have to be aware of, okay, let me hold on. Before you continue, is this a space that you want me to give you my advice, my thoughts, or you just want me to listen? And most times people will say, I want you to listen. I don't really care what you think. I just want to get this out. Because sometimes I think that will help people to feel supported if the clarity of the role in the discussion is made in terms of what is it that they want from you. Because some people, like I said, they don't necessarily want you giving them feedback and advice. They just want a safe space, judgmental, but not too judgmental, Doc. So yeah, I just think that's something that we have to keep in mind as well as we start to allow people to be more vulnerable, is creating clarity on what it is that they need from you, not what you want to provide them with.
And that's a vulnerable thing to do, JD. That for me to ask you, all right, so JD, I hear you moving and asking and talking about something. So what role do you want me to play in this conversation? Do you want me to challenge, push back? I have some thoughts, or you just really want me to actively listen to what you have going on? Many times people are just trying to vomit the bullshit out. They're trying to get this stuff out of me because it's toxic and I don't want to hold it anymore. And I don't want you to try to fix it. Someone that has passed away in my world, you can't fix that. But you can actively listen, and I can feel better in the 15 minutes of vomit or regurgitation of issue may make me feel better.
So I have a question for the group. So if some people come to me and they say, I have no one to talk to or whatever, and that's weird because they're talking to me. But if people feel like that, what do you think are some methods they can use that will make them more comfortable with, I guess, an outlet?
I think I'm always like, I hope I can make you feel as comfortable as possible, but I get like, everything ain't for me, right? So my big thing is like, I always try to just encourage people to find an outlet. And like, I'm a poet, so a lot of some stuff I don't tell nobody. I go write in my book, and like I have a daily prayer journal. Some stuff is just between me and God. I can't be telling people. But I think, you have to figure out what that outlet is for you. And like, I just encourage people, like, even if it's just, especially like now, right, with COVID and parents being home and dealing with their kids for 23 hours now, like, maybe it's just taking them 15 minutes at the end of the day to be like, all right, we had a hard day, we had a good day, and just giving yourself that space to reflect. Because, like growing up in a Black household, I'm too tired to be sick and tired. I don't take those moments. I got to keep going. So I think just something as small as just taking a moment to really reflect on what you're doing and giving yourself the space to not be okay, or to say like, this was hard, or to be like, wow, this day was amazing. I'm so blessed. I'm so grateful for that. Because, you know, like there's two sides of mental wellness. It isn't always bad and depressed and sad and diagnoses. Sometimes it's just, this is an amazing moment and I'm happy to be here. And, you know, like you have to be able to experience both of those things.
That's a great point in terms of that self-reflection. Because for someone like me who if I don't really know you, or even sometimes I don't really disclose any information. So I'm always, I don't do that. But I self-reflect. So between me and me, I'm having dialogue back and forth. Why you do that? What you think about doing this? Man, today, woo, you see the trees out. So we having conversation. I may not necessarily have a quote unquote person to talk to, but because, and this is just my experience, everyone's experience is different, and something works different for everyone. But for me, the internal dialogue and self-reflection has allowed my wellness journey to kind of put a little gas to my wellness journey, because I spend so much time internally having discussions back and forth. And my method that has worked is journaling. So writing down a lot of things. Sometimes it's not even what I'm writing. It's just the process of being present. So you can't write and be thinking about other things. It's just an act that forces you to be present. And that's something that has worked for me.
I'm with you and Imani, JD. My biggest thing is, we talked about it before about knowledge of self and figuring out, like everybody know they triggers them the bad way. Figure out what triggers you the good way. Like figure out what brings you back. And you also got to know that that's a house you got to build. Like you might really love to write. Like Imani's a poet, but like it's going to take you a second to be able to sit down all the time and for it to work the way you want. Just because it didn't work the way you wanted the first time, the fact that you sat down is the start. And I think you have to train it like you train sports, like you train anything. I trained, like we talked about me doing music, right? And I've played the piano since I was in 8th grade. I've done all these things, and I recognize what it did for me mentally, what it made me feel like. And I've always been able to go there because I trained it to never lie. My expression does not lie because that's the only thing I've used it for this long. So anytime I feel stuff going wrong, I know exactly where to go. And then sometimes I might just scribble on a piece of paper, but I went in there and I got it out. I was in my space that I built. And I encourage everybody to find something that is between, like you said, me and me, that reflection, recognizing my own eyes.
And for the group, do we think that our childhood traumas, even sometimes as far back into the womb, affect the adult struggles that we deal with? And if so, how are some ways that we can be more aware of, hey, some things that happened or some struggles that happened when you were younger affect now? For me, growing up not having a lot affects me in the sense that if I take 2 meals home from the practice facility, I'm not eating anything else until I finish the meals that I brought home from the practice facility. Even though I can afford to go wherever I want to eat, I'm going to eat that, or I'm going to order Chipotle. Because in my mind, it's like, I got to make sure I'm not spending too much money on food. I got to make sure I'm not, if I buy something new, I'm going to take a real long time to wear it, because I'm like, if I wear it, then I got to. But that stems from surviving. And Doc, we talk about this a lot, the mindset of survival versus thriving. Like, come on, man, you can eat something other than practice facility food. But if you look at my fridge, you're going to say, dang, you got containers and almond milk. Like, what's going on? But for me, I think that's a place where I look back like, dang, I'm still acting as if I can't afford to go and order something nice to eat. So I just want to just get thoughts on that.
Well, I should have like a tattoo that says daddy issues right here. It took me so long to even understand that I had daddy issues. And I'm just like, what is going on? The world is crazy. But it was really me. Like I had to really get over that. Like that affected everything that I thought about myself. I was like, I'm not good enough, and I'm not this, and I'm not that. And I was always comparing myself, and I was always looking for attention from men. Like, hello, do you not see me? So it was a lot of issues that my childhood, I didn't have no daddy, but I did have my mom. So a lot of times I let that overshadow the love that I was getting from my mom. And like, it took me a really long time to be like, girl, get it together and like be the strong woman that your mom has been and the woman that she raised you to be. So it took me a while to even understand and realize that I had issues from my childhood in the first place.
I think that speaks to this piece of survival versus thriving, that we are taught early on to survive, hold tight to survival. And even though we move into spaces where we could fully thrive, we still have a survival mindset. So figuring out where we are currently, where we're headed, am I surviving now? No, I don't have to do that anymore. I didn't realize it. I'm really in a space of thriving. And it reminds me of a space, a thing that I talk about a lot, is that we have to be better at looking in the mirror as opposed to looking out the window. If I look out the window, I can say, hey man, there's struggles out there, man, it's tough. Hope things get better for me and those people outside of my window. But to look in the mirror is much more work. Who am I? Who am I in the context of my family and my community? Who do I want to be? That's heavy lifting, lots of work that accompanies that. And if I look in the mirror, what am I beginning to do? I'm reflecting, and that reflection process is about that self-talk. That as I'm speaking now, each and every one of us, each and every one of you is having a conversation with yourself. Hey, what are you talking about? Hey, Doc Beard, look how great his beard is. What are you doing? Right? That's what we do. We have more conversations with ourselves than all the people in our lives combined together could ever have with us. So it means that the impact and the ability to impact myself much higher than anyone else could ever have on me. So looking in the mirror, many times we don't want to do, but it is where our growth will begin. Won't begin by looking out and trying to figure out what's going. It will be looking within. So recognizing that is critical.
And to that point, Doc, it's interesting to hear you talk about the self-talk, because I don't know if you brought up this concept, but imagining that voice being the perfect parent. So if you could come up with the perfect parent or perfect advisor, how would you want that person to interact with you? And if that's not the engagement, then you need to shut that conversation off. On top of, if that voice were a friend, would you still engage with them? Would you allow that person to speak to you the way that or a lot of times people speak to themselves? No, you'd be like, hey, you disrespected me. That's going to be the last time you talk to me like that. But we allow ourselves to talk about ourselves in a way that we would never let another person speak to us. So just being aware of, okay, what's that relationship like?
And JD, what would we do if that voice in our head that oftentimes is very negative, if it was a person saying those exact same things to it, we say, hey man, I'm finna swing on your ass. Hey man, hey, that's out of bounds. You ain't finna disrespect me over and over again. But we don't do that. We take that internalized voice that can be so negative. We work that into our day-to-day process. And athletically, we do the same thing. We get on the court and we talk shit to ourselves about our work. Come on, man, you suck with that, man. That's negative. We do that all too often. I know CJ's got something, but I think that is about awareness and working. Go ahead, CJ.
Nah, you basically were saying what I was about to say. I'm like, I know it's me that's saying it. I know, you get to a point. So like, I'm fighting with myself all the time. Like you said, you would tell a person that was standing in front of you to get away, or you would leave, or you would do something to erase it. And then that's what goes back to what we talked about with curiosity too. Like, that's why searching for yourself and for things that can make you grow and make you better is so important, because you don't want that voice talking to you to be stupid. If that voice that's talking to you don't know nothing, you do what you know. Like, that's what you always gonna fall back to. At the end of the day, I know we got a lot of things we gotta overcome, but at the end of the day, if it ain't me that start to fixing, then it ain't I gotta reach out to somebody for help. I gotta start to read the books. I gotta start to pray or whatever it is for me. So until me and that voice start, say Wayne Flick, which is hard. I'm not saying that's easy, and there's steps to get to that, but just know that that's the biggest part to overcome.
And knowing, CJ, that I'm not finna worry about what everybody else thinks about my engagement with that person inside of me. I can't worry about how CJ's looking at me and saying it's cool to get that information from CJ about what he thinks Corey should or shouldn't do. But CJ don't lay down with Corey at the end of the night. CJ don't wake up. CJ ain't in my dream. So I have to be more comfortable with me. It's cool for CJ to give me that input, but at the end of the day, CJ done walk this journey. He may be beside me or behind me or in front of me, but he don't walk in these shoes every day. So how can I find the ability to be comfortable with me and let CJ get down with whatever comes from that? Let JD understand whoever that person is the real me, but I'm not dependent on his understanding.
Chris, I had a question in terms of the fact that you run a very successful business online, and social media is a platform that you utilize often, but also having a real life that you have to live and struggles that you may have in that real life. With the generation that utilizes social media so much, how do you balance providing a service and a certain product via social media while still being authentic and still managing the personal struggles that you may have?
You know, I do a lot of work on myself every single day because that world is just nasty. It's big, it's brutal. It's kind of like, oh my gosh, it will kill you if you let it. So I take a step away from it. I'm not on social media as much as people think I am. I just post and I go, because I know that if I sit there and I feed into it, I'm going to start, all those demons are going to start coming. The comparison, the like, you're not good enough. Like, you should be up here. You should be doing this. You should be doing that. So I take myself away from that so that I can truly focus on my own like voice and what I'm trying to get across. And I also create I have a page for women and it's private. So on that page, I can be more open and like, hey girl, you know, this happened. And they respond to me in a manner that I would appreciate, versus if I put it on my big page and then I'm opening myself up to a lot of like comments that I might not want, some opinions I might not want, some eyes that I might not want. So I'm very careful to separate what I'm doing. I'm very careful to put out what I'm comfortable with putting out. And I'm very careful not to stay there too long in that space because it's not a healthy space at all.
And then we got about 2 minutes until we get to the Q&A. So anybody that's tuned in, if you have any questions, send them in and we'll get to them after this. For the group, I just wanted to know, what was the moment that you became aware of mental wellness or became aware of just receiving psychological support? And then as we go into being parents or aunts and uncles or whatever the case may be, how do we see ourselves passing on that information to that next generation? For me, watching my dad always randomly have meditation music on and randomly stretching and taking deep breaths growing up was my first engagement. When I was young, I used to always say, what you doing all that breathing for? He never really explained what he was doing or never really told me what it was called. But as I got older, I realized like, damn, it actually feels good in the middle of the day to just, so I'm like, for him, there was so much going on being a single parent of 3 and where we grew up and things that we were going through. Those are probably his methods of always staying centered. So being able to watch that and not really know. And then as I got older, being able to implement just the random deep breathing, random calming music as I went to sleep, that was kind of my transition. And then for me, a big piece of what I do is because I have 3 young nieces, that they're gonna choose their partner potentially based off of both their father and based off of their uncles. So I have to make sure that I'm providing them with some normalcy in, oh, it's cool to have a man who expresses how he feels and allows you to express how you feel. So making sure that they see firsthand, and I don't have to tell them, hey, Zahara, hey, Mad, hey, Asada, this is what you should look for. It's like I can provide them with some form of an example or a real model, as Dr. Yeager and Mike Walker talk about. But that's kind of my feel.
So I didn't know I needed to take care of my mental health until, and this is funny, I saw a video of myself screaming at somebody and I was like, oh my God, is that me? Like, I didn't really understand that I was acting a plum fool. and I couldn't like figure out why. So I had to like sit with myself and go, okay, girl, that's not cute. That's not okay. But that only came after so much, I guess, hurt and pain and not understanding that I was actually in really toxic situations that I had to deal with. And that's how mine started, from seeing myself like that. And I was like, I do not want to look like that ever again.
Mine started just from it kind of like just knocked me over the head too many times. You know, I just started, as I was growing older, you just kind of, some things you learn just from experience. Like I said, I dealt with a lot of things without knowing, because it was never expressed to me what those things were or what it was. So as I recognized, this is familiar. You know, I felt like this, and everything was, from the way I was playing basketball, from the way I talked to my friends, to my family. It was all the same cycle every time I hit it. And I was like, so I finally, you know, got down one time and kind of got behind it. Like, okay, this is that, that's this is what's happening when I do this. Started taking notes, started writing even more on exactly what it was, not just what I was doing before. I started being direct. And once I started being direct, it allowed me to really see it. It like popped off the paper. And I was able to like recall things that happened 10 years ago that I had no idea I was holding on to. Like, I was able to just start finding all these things that were leading up. Like you said, it's not the first emotion. All these things are just backed up. And that was being direct was for me. Just taking it straight on, running right into it. And if it hurt, it hurt, but we're going to come out.
I think also just deciding the type of person you want to be. I come from a lot of generational trauma and damage, and it's so funny, like for me, like I grew up in an abusive household, and when you say that, people expect your parents to be like little demon people, and they're terrible people, and my parents were great people. They did the best they could. It just wasn't enough, and they trusted the wrong people with me, and therein lied my abuse, right? And so like forgiving my parents for what they could not do was a lot. And it really helps me let go of a lot of that anger and resentment, because I got to a point where I'm 18, 19, 20, and I'm like, yo, I don't like me. Like, I don't like the fact that I'm angry all the time, like that I got a quick trigger. Like, I don't like that quality about me. And like me hanging on to this resentment and this anger, it ain't hurting them. Like they raised their kid. I'm out their house. Like, you know what I mean? So forgiving them for an apology I may never have adequately gotten, or for them doing and understanding that they did the best they can and it wasn't enough, really helped me, because I think I grew up romanticizing who my parents were, romanticizing love and a perfect happy family on TV that I always wanted to have, and understanding for me that love is not enough and I require a lot more. Change my relationship with myself, change my relationship with the people I call my partners, with my friends. And like, that was a big step for me in terms of my mental wellness journey. And then obviously on the clinical side, really taking therapy seriously and staying on medication, not hopping on and off, and being confident enough to say like, yes, this is something I have to do every day. And that's okay. And that doesn't diminish me as an adult. That doesn't diminish me as a person. That doesn't mean I'm a lot to deal with. Like, I'm still a great partner, great friend, a great everything. This is just a part of my journey and my story.
So Imani, you talk about, and all y'all, just a pattern or a theme they come up. So we see these fake ass versions of what families are supposed to be on TV. Watch the Cosby Show. See, y'all young, y'all don't remember the Cosby Show. I remember the Cosby Show. But those versions of what
Hold on, Doc. My first love was Felicia Rashad.
Go ahead on then. Go ahead on. All right, you feel me on that then. So if we have these versions of perfection that we see and we compare to ours, we say, man, we must really be a mess. But those are facades. Those are dream versions. That doesn't mean the elements of what we saw in those couldn't be true. But those are TV models. They're not real models. So if we can step back and recognize that, what I heard all of you say is that those moments that you started to see the mirror, you started to see yourselves. I heard Chris even say, I saw a video. I'm like, is that me doing that? I didn't realize I sounded like that. I didn't even realize I did that. So that's that moment of seeing the mirror. For me, my wife and I were having some struggles. I was having some struggles with alcohol, all those pieces. And we began to see a therapist for the first time. And that became my mirror that I had to reflect in and say, man, I didn't realize I was being all like that. I had no idea, similar to what Chris said. That began my journey, and it began my journey so strongly that now not only did I reflect, but then I began to say, maybe this is something that I can do to be helpful to others. You know, in my line of work, we call it being a wounded healer. If you're wounded and you survive and make it, what you can do is turn to others in your circle and say, hey, I'm not trying to be no expert on this, but I want to tell you, hey, I survived it, so maybe here's some elements that may help you. So that process of being a wounded healer opened the door for me, and began my journey towards healing. And it's not a journey that I'll ever finish. The journey towards healing is never done. It is a process that will continue on throughout our lives. So that's my piece, JD.
As we get into the Q&A, the first question is for you, Chris, and anybody else can chime in as well. How do you work on steering away from bad habits?
Okay, so I have worked on myself a lot, like I keep saying, because I do. And now I'm to the point where I'm really good at making a decision and sticking with that decision and doing what I have to do in order to stick to that decision. So that's how I get into the pattern of breaking habits. For example, I had to make a decision about 7 weeks ago. I was like, oh, I want to stop eating meat. I did it cold turkey. I wasn't like, okay, I'm going to, not eat meat today. I'm going to eat it tomorrow. No, I did it. I stopped. And that's how I go about a lot of things that I do, because if I want to be better, I'm going to have to put my best foot forward, period. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. There's no, I'm going to like dip up here and down. No, you have to just go straight through it. And that's how I make a lot of my decisions. I understand that that's not easy, but that's just how I do it.
Chris, quickly to that point, we must find the ability to say no to others without an excuse. Hey, you want to go be on the podcast? No, I ain't. No, I'm good right now. I don't have to give you an excuse on that. This is my choice. So being comfortable enough with ourselves to say no and not have to fill in 38 sentences about why I said no. It's just no, right? Being comfortable with that, I think, is really important.
Being non-negotiable, like she said, that's that whatever the habit is or whatever I'm trying to drop, if I know that it's hindering my bigger picture, then we shouldn't even be standing here, me and myself. Like,
right.
And the fact of the matter, it's gonna happen. That's everybody. That's life. That's how you get better at the journey. That's how you get better growing as a person. You have to go through these things to be the best. Something got to test you. That's just what it is. If nothing ever tested you, then we would never be able to. We wouldn't be doing what we're doing now to help people, because we would have never thought to step out on the ledge. So I think it's just about, back to what Imani said, deciding who you want to be. And a lot of people, it take a course of getting knocked down and getting tired of stitching themselves up. Like, you're tired of bleeding. If that's what it is, it's what it is. Everybody's different.
There is no testimony without a test. There is no message without a mess, right? You can't have it. You can't have no message to give your ass if I ain't had no mess. Can't give you no testimony on unless I done been tested.
Hey, I'm gonna call my dad. My daddy minister. I'm gonna have.
I get mine on the line too.
I'm gonna get him in here.
That's why we have it on Sundays.
Yeah, there you go.
Hey,
that's good.
Hey, I'm all with it. I'm with it.
For me, it's trying to put people around you that can check you with compassion. So people who aren't afraid to say, hey, I didn't really like how you said that, but they're saying it with the intention of giving you a space to grow, not an intention of trying to tell you what you don't do right or what you shouldn't be doing. So intentionally finding people who will check you and correct you and make you aware, but they're doing that with compassion in mind.
Mm-hmm.
The next question is, CJ, what is the one issue as a youth that created the biggest mental health challenge, and what could have been done by others to have assisted you in better handling that issue? You're on mute.
My bad. The biggest thing, we talked about this last week also, and I'm still standing on this. I think it's been a lot in my notes, and when I'm reading, I think that's the biggest thing is calling me to say it. Being accessible. Yeah, the podcast me and you and Doc had, being accessible to everything, feeling like you have to be, feeling like you need to be, feeling like what's going on in your age bracket, on your team, in your club, whatever is what I need to do because that's what's been going on. And that's, in our community, that's the space that we put in because it's like, imagine being a bee in a hive that's judged by the hive because you're not like them. And then you get outside the hive and you get judged for being from the hive. Like, it's a crazy space to be in. And you learn to just lean into the crowd because somebody gonna take me in. Like, if I'm unnoticeable, then it's easy for you to take me in. And I wish there were people around me that had been through those things that would have said it was okay. I had one person through my whole time growing up say that to me, and it was my barber. Out of all the people I came to, the dude I saw every 2 weeks. Like, imagine the people I see all the time. I go to church every Sunday. I mean, don't get me wrong, me and my dad had conversations, but you know, when it's that close to home, when you get to a certain age, sometimes you need that validation from outside because when somebody been like this over you your whole life, you think they just doing it because they got to. And it's nothing against them. And it's nothing, and my father is an amazing man. My mother is an amazing woman. My grandmother is the same. But you got to go out. And there's plenty of people in the communities that stand in places that are pillars for us in our communities that don't take that seriously.
It's crazy you say that, see, because, again, I feel like I got the best pops ever. When I go to LA, we could be playing the Lakers, I'm going to my barbershop because Brother Eric is going to give me some information and some conversation that I can't get anywhere else. And it's just a feeling of feeling grounded in that barbershop space. And it's obviously the movie depicts a certain amount, but I don't think people outside of our Black and brown communities understand the safe space of a barbershop, a hair salon, the love that you get, the genuineness that you get from everybody in there is like, man, you know you're going to get, man, in the first chair, anytime you go in there, he's going to be trying to sell you the next jersey or the new, you're like, how you get, that just came out, how you got 10 of those? You're like, oh, man, young fella, don't worry about it, but if you need 3 of them, I can order it to you if I don't got it. You know what I mean?
And speaking of, JD, remember how you said people that can check you? You knew, like, to take about the barbershop. I knew if I went in and I had 30 on Tuesday, it was going to be love. If I came in and I got roasted on Tuesday, they was going to let me know I got roasted
you're
too.
Supposed to be all state. How you?
And it's fine. And I'm good because I know these people in here, if somebody ran in that door, they fight with me. I know that. So they can say whatever they want to say to me because I know it's from the best place it can be from.
And then Doc, last one for you is, what are some ways that people can help or get help with anxiety?
So it goes back to that cornerstone piece of being aware, having a level of awareness that it's not just me feeling a little anxiousness, but that anxiety comes to visit us, especially in times of isolation. So when we become more isolated, like in these moments now, we become more anxious. Anxiety is really rooted in the worry or rumination about what's going to happen in the future, right? Being worried about what's coming, even though oftentimes we have zero control over that future, we get worried and anxious about it, and it can spread itself into many aspects and corners of our life. So first of all, recognizing that what anxiety is, and then calming ourselves down. One thing to do that can push anxiety in the face and depression. Depression is being worried or ruminating about what has happened. Anxiety about ruminating the future. But one thing we then want to do is find moments to stay in the present. And one tool that we can utilize to push back on anxiety is to focus on our breathing. If you right now focus on the breathing that you are having, if it's shallow, if it's deep, if you really focus on that, you can't be in the past, you can't be in the future. You're in the present. Staying in that present moment will push back on that anxiety. I know that's just a quick version, but that's one way that we can avoid or get away from that anxiousness.
Okay. And then the last question for the group, Growth is often achieved by learning and unlearning at the same time. Can we just share a time when our awareness has allowed us to unlearn in order to grow? For me, growing up in an environment where we speak our mind and everybody around me is very blunt and direct. So it's habitual for me. I'm gonna say the first thing on my mind, I'm saying it to you, and I'm used to having people that are gonna accept that and give me back the first thing that they feel. But being in different spaces, everybody's not comfortable with bluntness and that directness. So understanding that sometimes the second thing that you want to say or the second version should be flipped, and you should say that first, because everybody's not from where we come from. We're literally, my friends, we could cuss each other out and be like, man, and the conversation is loving. But if you're from the outside looking like, are they about to fight? Is something about to happen? And it's like, we're just talking about whose shoes are better, or who, if you mute us, but you look at the body language, you'll think like, I might have to, I don't know. But for us, it's like, nah, we talk like this. But there's other people who they've never experienced somebody who talks. And they're already afraid that you're a Black male. So you combine the two, it's like, whoa.
Painful.
So understanding and having people that make you aware of, hey, how that comes off is a little strong, allow me to kind of unlearn that aggressive bluntness.
So I'll let everybody else finish that point. But the one thing that I would add, I think I was just kind of looking through some things, and Chris talked about about pain and growth. So let's be very clear that most growth that we have in our lives, there will be associated pain. So let us then view the pain as an indicator of growth, not just pain, but it indicates that I may be growing in a space that could be tough. So for instance, my sons, who are all big kids, would come to me when they were having growing pains. And the very first thing I began to describe to them is, hey, you want to be tall and big like Pops. So you're going to have some of that pain, son, when your knees are pulling apart to get that growth. So don't just see it as painful. See it as an indication that I'm growing, right? Life is very similar. That use that as an indication that I'm moving into a space of growth. I think that's one thing that we should focus on as well.
I had to unlearn how I viewed myself based off of other people's definition of me. So I realized that I was saying mean things to myself, and then I had to say, do you really believe that? No, of course not, you don't believe that. So I had to alter how I was, I guess, taking in information from the outside, which I get a lot of outside information on Instagram, and these people don't know who I am. They don't understand me. Honestly, their opinion is not valid. Now, if I start feeding into that and really believing them, I'm going to self-destruct. So I had to unlearn that part.
Okay, then as we close, you got one, CJ? Muted.
I keep doing that. I don't know why I keep doing it. No, I said, you good. I just was like repeating what they were saying, just kind of talking to myself.
Okay. Then as we close, we just want everybody to kind of touch on one, what you took from this conversation, and then kind of what you hope to see from this conversation. And Chris, you want to start? Imani, I'll let you go first.
I think Dr. Corey gave us a lot of gems, a lot of moments that's going to preach, and hopefully, similar to what CJ was saying earlier, like we take it in and maybe it'll hit us later or sometime this week. But I think just being in a room with Black professionals, willing to talk about mental health and mental wellness is always powerful, that in of itself, and seeing the different perspectives, because I think we all have a very different walk of life and a different way we approach this, but it shows us how these common things can connect us instead of separate us. So I think this has been super powerful, and I'm blessed to be a part of it.
Same. One thing that I kind of took from it, and we talk about it a lot, is meeting people where they are. In the Black and brown community, this conversation isn't common. It's not normalized, and that's what we're trying to do. So when people are leaning in to seek help, meet them where they are. We don't have to try to impose where we are on someone else. And just continue to, inside of sports and outside of sports, that people are aware of, are you creating a space for people to go and share their stories? Are you creating an environment where people are comfortable sharing what they're struggling with and trying to educate yourself on a very basic level on what to do with that information? Because a lot of times we ask people to be vulnerable, they give us information, we don't know what to do with it. So equipping ourselves with the tools, we may not have a therapist on the line or some, but have some form of knowledge on, okay, what can I do with the information that's brought to me and my peers? Because when we do create that safe space, we have to be able to do something with the information that's going to come to us. And then the last thing is the importance of those people around you. So if you have people around you that are feeding the negative voice in your head, and it's only going to snowball affect that version of yourself that you get. But if you have people on the other side who are feeding the positive voice in your head, that's going to be a byproduct of a lot of the decisions and the behaviors that we have.
I give you one sentence on my takeaway is the importance in these moments and all moments of walks of life is finding the ability to share, as you said, JD, share, but also receive love, right? That as I move, I'm looking to share love and receive it. It's a reciprocal process. The more I share it, the more I'll receive it. So this conversation was a culmination of sharing and receiving love verbally through this hour that we spent together. So finding more of those moments. If we can do this for an hour, can we expand to share and receive love more often in our lives?
I think the biggest thing for me is what I try to do whenever I speak or have a conversation with people is continue to create a pipeline of wisdom back to our communities. I think everybody know everything. Like everybody got something to say about everything. Everybody know, even growing up, especially in the communities we grew up in as athletes, like guys, they started to see some potential. Everybody said, well, you know, you should do this workout, or you do this to make your legs stronger, this to make your jump shot, or this to be the whatever. But none of this is applied to anything that you showing me in front of me, though. Like I'm looking at you telling me everything. If you knew this, why nobody was applying this to the people before me that I saw hoopers better than me who couldn't get out of here, or the next person. And that's not just for sports, it's for anything. And I think seeing people, representation is everything. Seeing people have been through the struggle and the fire and have taken those things and those gems and applied them. That's the biggest thing. I don't care about being told everything all the time. Seeing somebody that's applied it, like if Michael Jordan came and told you how to jump, you're going to listen. Because you've seen it applied. You know what I'm saying? So that's how I feel about it.
CJ, that's the difference between my granny would say, that's the difference between knowledge and wisdom, boy. Knowledge is getting the info. Cool to have it. Look at all them books on the shelf. You can read them all. Got info. Wisdom is the application thereof. How do I take what I get and apply it in my life? So my big ass know I need to lose weight. I know how to do it. Oh, I can count them points, you can do all that stuff. That's good info. But until I apply said information, it's not wisdom, right?
Chris, finish this off.
Okay, so this conversation made me more aware of some issues that I haven't really touched on with other people. So it's gonna help me understand people a little more so that I'm able to pour into them. And that's really my aim every single day. It also made me aware of how I interact with somebody who's looking to speak to me. What do you want me to be in this conversation? I never ask that. I just offer my opinion. So that's something that I'm going to apply.
Perfect. Again, we appreciate you guys for being a part of this and for everyone attending. We're going to upload this to our YouTube channel in the next couple of days. We'll continue to put out our podcast episode. Our most recent one with CJ is out on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and wherever you find your podcast. We'll be back again next Sunday, but we appreciate you being a part of this and continuing to help us normalize this conversation throughout our communities and just on a day-to-day level, especially with what's going on. These conversations are more useful and beneficial than ever. So thank you.
Appreciate y'all. Good combo.
Yes, sir. Thank y'all, man. Love. Blessings.